Could y'all hear that? I've never heard that before. That was weird.
Yeah.
So we have with us today Stephanie Thomas and Selena from the Children's Advocacy Center. I think I'm supposed to put Blue Ridge somewhere in there at the beginning or the end of that. Y'all can tell me the appropriate name when I turn it over to you. And so I'm going to let them explain to you what the Children's Advocacy Center is and their roles there. And then we'll get to talking a little bit about trauma and the programs that they have. So Stephanie, Selena, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So I'll ask y'all just to introduce yourselves and tell what your positions are there at the Advocacy Center.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Sorry, we're trying to decide who's going to go first.
Well, sometimes we do alphabetical, but alphabetical by first name won't help y'all. So you'll
that won't help us very much. I'll let you go first.
Okay.
You're the director.
So I'm Selena Moretz. I'm the director and the forensic interviewer here at the Children's Advocacy Center of the Blue Ridge. That's what we've been, but we just got an email a little while back that now we're going to be Blue Ridge Children's Advocacy Center of South Mountain Children and Family Services. So
good grief.
if you ever call the office, I will not answer the phone like that, so they can just forget that. But yeah. I think I've been here long enough with the name of Children's Advocacy Center of the Blue Ridge. That's the way it's going to stay in my head. So they'll just have to understand that.
That's what it says on the sign.
Yeah, the sign still says that. We're good with it. So our agency has been open since 2011, and I've been the director the whole time. And then I'll let Stephanie tell when she came.
Yeah, so I've been here about over 3 years. It'll be 4 years in October, I guess. So it's really flown. It doesn't feel like that long, but anyway, yeah. And I'm the family advocate here and also the backup forensic interviewer.
So we take referrals from DSS or law enforcement anytime there's allegations that involve a child, whether it be for physical abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, witness to violent crime, drug endangerment. So those referrals have to come from DSS or law enforcement because there has to be that open investigation. We get a lot of calls from pediatricians or attorneys who are dealing with families, and there's some concern that there's some type of abuse that's happening. We always explain to them that they are mandated reporters, so they have to make that report to DSS and law enforcement. So from there, our agency provides a forensic interview. Typically, I'm the one who does the forensic interview. Stephanie will do backups if I'm not available or if it's a conflict case for myself. But we do those interviews in a way that they're non-leading. We don't introduce any information to the children. We want to make sure that this interview will hold up in court. That's my biggest fear always when I do an interview. I don't ever want to contaminate an interview so that it's going to make it a more difficult court case for somebody. So we do the forensic interview.
Or just today?
I didn't get today's.
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Everything that I do in the interview room is video and audio recorded, that so DSS and law enforcement can sit in a different room and hear everything as it happens and hear everything, see everything. Towards the end of the interview, I'll step out to ask them if they need me to ask any other types of questions or if I need to get clarification on anything that the child has said up until that point. We do that is we don't want that child to have to be talked to multiple times. That was the whole reason for the CAC concept. But back in the 80s didn't like the way that things were going with children in abuse cases because they would go to school and they would disclose to a teacher and then they'd have to talk with a counselor and then they'd have to talk to the school nurse and the principal and then they'd take them to a hospital and a detective and a DA. So to make it a much easier, smooth process, they created the child advocacy centers so it could be everybody comes together and we all collaborate together and that child only has to talk about that hopefully one time. In the medical, which is typically the next step, we do have Beth Browning, who's our nurse practitioner. She's a SANE nurse, which is a sexual assault nurse examiner, pediatric and adolescent. So she will talk to the child briefly, but she lets the child know that this visit with her is to make sure that their body's safe and healthy. She does care about what the allegations are, but she wants to make sure that the child's body is safe and healthy. And if it's not, that she's going to find out something that can make the child's body safe and healthy. If they have STDs, they're going to make sure that they get a prescription. If they have some sort of growth on their toe, she's going to help make sure that they get an appointment for that. It doesn't matter what's wrong with their body. It doesn't have to be related to the current allegations, but she's there for the whole body. And she explains to them all of that in the beginning of the appointment. She does talk to them very briefly about any concerns they have about their body. Sometimes kids will share more information with her as a medical provider than what they do in the interview, because they think of her as the medical provider that she's going to see something. We've had a lot of kids who are like, well, you're the nurse, I need to go ahead and tell you about it because you're going to see what happened. A lot of children and a lot of adults have this misconception that you can look at a person's vaginal area and tell if they've had sex or not. We've had to educate a lot of parents who come into our office. No, we can't look at your child and see if they've had sex or not. That's not something that's possible. So a lot of education goes on in the office as well. So from there, after the interview and the medical, Stephanie's spending time with them during that whole process and explaining lots of things to them. So I'll let her talk about what she does while she's with them.
I'm really glad that you brought that up about parts of the medical, because I was like, that might be a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I did want to say something about that. But basically, so like Selena was saying, at the Children's Advocacy Center, the family can kind of get it brings everybody together so that the child and the family can kind of get everything done at one time or less times, rather than the child having to talk about it over and over again. And so typically the way that we do things is, while Selena is interviewing the child, I'll be meeting with the parent, and kind of a lot goes into that. I mean, a lot of it is just, we do a lot of listening because folks come in and there's all kinds of different situations. Sometimes people come in and they've kind of been through this before, or there's not, really like a whole lot of concern. And sometimes people come in and their whole world's been turned upside down and it's the worst day of their lives and they're not sure how they're going to go on. And so there's just so many different situations. Mainly we just want to give, to listen and to give them as much information as we possibly can, even just about what they can expect during the next couple hours, what the appointment's going to be like, what the day's going to be like. We try not to overwhelm them with too much right up front, but we also just want to let them know what's going to be available to them and what kind of resources they have. I do spend a lot of time talking about what what they'll face that day and also the next appointment. We only get our nurse one day a week because she works in 4 counties. And so sometimes people will come in, and if they come in on a day when we have our nurse, the child can get their forensic interview and their medical exam in the same day. But a lot of times the child comes in for the forensic interview as their first appointment, and then the next appointment is going to be the one that they have with our nurse. And so we do spend a lot of time educating the parents and everybody about what that medical is, because I think a lot of times they hear that word medical exam for this kind of case, and they think it's going to be something that's very invasive and very traumatic. And so we spend a lot of time educating them that it's really not. It's not meant to be an exam that's traumatic in any way. It's in no way an internal exam. In most cases, unless there's a case that's an emergency and like a rape kit would need to be done, that's something that's a bit different. But for most of our cases, it's not a super invasive exam. The child is in control the whole time. If there's something that they're uncomfortable with or upset by, all they have to do is just let our nurse know. And so we let them know about that. But I try to always remember to share with parents that some of the things that I love about the medical exam is, one, like Selena was saying, it kind of gives that child a second chance to say anything that they need to say. And so if in the interview, they didn't tell the interviewer everything that happened, or maybe they just weren't comfortable, or maybe they just went home and remembered something else that they need to say, they can come in and tell our nurse that. And a lot of times they do. Our nurse can also ask some more direct questions because she doesn't fall under the same hearsay laws in courts, and she's a medical provider. But probably my favorite part about doing that medical exam is that like Selena was saying, there's no way that, all those areas in the genital area are mucous membranes. And so those areas heal so quickly that there's no way that our nurse can, look at a teenager and tell their parents whether they've had sex or something like that. So all those areas heal so fast. But I love that in cases, even when we have a sexual abuse case where the child has disclosed that, when they come in for that medical exam, Beth can look at their body. And at the end of that exam, she can say, you know what, I believe you. I believe what you said, but your body is perfect. You look very healthy. You look perfect. And I just love that aspect of it because it seems so important for their emotional healing to know that somebody believes me, but my body's still perfect. Nobody can look at me and tell that this happened. So,
yeah, and it's good. Whenever we do the medicals, we can also do pregnancy tests. We do the STD checks. We do drug screens. We're also able to do hair follicle testing that will allow the lab to check 3 months back to see if there's any drugs in their system. And since COVID has started, we have seen an increase in positive drug screens in infants, children that are at home. We had an 8-month-old baby that tested positive for meth, benzos, THC, and cocaine. So it's just really sad to see all of this happening. But just with the COVID situation, currently everybody's stuck at home, and these parents, they don't know how to deal with the situation. Some have lost their jobs. Some are now trying to become, supervising their children, which they're not used to doing because they send them to school every day. And a lot of these parents don't know how to deal with their children on a daily basis. That's why they're at school. So parents are just trying to find other ways of how to cope. And unfortunately, they're turning to drugs to do that. So I'm trying to think. And as far as the medical part of it as well, we can do rape kits. If it's a prepubescent child, we'll do a rape kit up to 72 hours. If they're postpubescent, we'll go up to 120 hours. And we can do all of that here. The only thing that we do not do in our office is like blood work. For the rape kit, we can prick a finger, but we can't take like a vial of blood or anything like that. So we have to send them to the hospital for that. And we can't do x-rays. It can be done here in our office.
So before we start talking about types of trauma, let's talk about types of trauma first, then we'll go into programs and services. So I'm guessing, just having worked with y'all for years and years, that rather than is there sexual abuse or physical abuse or is there not, it's more of a continuum from a one-time event with little to no violence, all the way to, I've thought about some of the cases that I've had in the past years where abuse was ongoing for years, chronic and pervasive and frequent. And so can you just talk a little bit about kind of the reality of that, the types of trauma that you see?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to?
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Well, jump in anytime. So it's a lot, and we find that a lot of times, different kinds of situations and different types of abuse kind of make it more likely that there'll be other types as well. So so for example, if there's a case and it has neglect, a lot of times we find that it's also a higher chance that child also might have been sexually abused. Or, in cases where there's drug endangerment, there's also higher risks of other type of abuse as well. And so I feel like a lot of times these go hand in hand, and, sometimes we'll get a case that just has one main allegation, whether it's neglect or drug endangerment or physical abuse or sexual abuse or emotional abuse. But I feel like it's a lot more common that anytime that there's a concern, it's usually multiple concerns. And then domestic violence is a big one that I know we see situations of that a lot, just where the kids have witnessed that, but also may have experienced some emotional abuse or physical abuse or neglect. Or
I think with the domestic violence, that's the hardest one for some people to realize how harmful that is to children, because even though they're not witnessing it happening, they're in another room, they're hearing everything. and they can't actually see what's going on. So in their mind, they're going to the worst place possible.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I grew up in a DV situation and I didn't see it, but I heard it. So I always thought, okay, the worst thing is happening to my parent at that point in time. So I was always scared whenever I heard anything, any loud noises, because it instantly made me think that all hell is fixing to break loose. So, I mean, and that's what I tried to tell the people that we work with, even though they're not seeing dad or mom hit each other, just verbal situation that they're hearing from a different room, traumatizing.
Yeah.
And I mean, and if you're living that day in and day out, there needs to be a stop to that, and there needs to be help for that kid. So
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Stephanie, when Selena's talking, if you could turn it just a little bit more towards her, every third or fourth. Perfect, thanks. She's black. It'll
Oh my.
Yeah, just get a little closer. Thank you. So I know what you're saying. I grew up in that same kind of situation, Selena, and the not knowing what was happening was incredibly terrifying. And
Yeah.
one interesting thing as you're talking about domestic violence is that even just a few years ago, I feel like that was not as accepted as far as making a report to DSS. But now almost every time I make a report about a child witnessing or even hearing domestic violence, it seems like those cases are taken a lot more than they used to be. And I think I had a conversation with one of them at some point where they said, you know, all the latest research and the latest legislation tells us that the incredibly elevated level of risk for the child to be even close, you know, in the periphery of that, even if they're not necessarily in the room. So I've appreciated that shift from, if it's not happening to them, then it's not harmful, to it's almost every time causes harm.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think I think that is something that we are able to do. I mean, we can speak of our own experience and try to educate the people that we work with to understand, you know what, I don't share that with everybody, but you know, whenever I see these kids who are in these situations and unfortunately sometimes nobody is doing anything about it, it's like, hey, look, this is reality. Like, these kids need help, and here's an example why. So I think it's good that we are able to advocate for these kids and talk about things. And I think we work with a really good group of social workers and detectives. And I think, I know Stephanie's got a good relationship with them too, but I've been here for 10 years. I don't mind calling me like, what the hello is going on? Like, what are we doing? So, and it's good that we can do that. And I'm not a social worker anymore. I did it for 6 years, but I'm not a detective, never have been. So whenever I call them and ask them a question, nobody gets upset with me. Because they just know that that's not my job anymore, and things have changed, but just help me understand, because I want to treat this child just like it's my own. I want to make sure that this kid is getting services like I do for my own kids. We just work with a really good group of people.
Yeah, and I love that about Watauga. A lot of us have been in our positions a really long time, and we all, for the most part, do a really good job collaborating and communicating.
Yeah.
So types of trauma, as varied as the day is long. So talk to me a little bit about the things that you do to help people find their resilience, the programs and services that y'all offer. Because I know that you said, well, that'll be the second part of my question. Is it always referrals from DSS and officers, or can people come there from therapy? But let's do the first question first. Tell me about some of your programs and services that y'all use to help people come from trauma.
Okay. Okay. All right. Sure. Okay. So let's see. So I'll start with the forensic interviews. So the forensic interviews and also the medical exams are the ones that we have to have that referral from DSS or law enforcement with the open investigation for. And so a lot of times that's how people kind of come in through our doors initially, but not always. So starting with those, we have those forensic interviews, we have the medical exam, we have the advocacy piece of that. So that goes from like the moment they walk in the door, where we're just, like I said, explaining what they can expect that day and just helping them as much as we can. that goes on from after they leave here. We can help them with case management. We can help them with finding and linking services, just anything that's going to help that child and family heal and thrive. That also goes on to all the way to if that case ends up going to court and that family has meetings at the DA's office to prepare for court, the child's preparing for court, they're going through that whole process. We can walk with them through that as well. So that kind of goes on for a while. We also have 2 therapists who work here who do a lot of counseling with kids. Mostly I don't know if mostly, but primarily one of the types of therapy that they do a lot is the trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or TFCBT. They also do other types. So we do a lot of referrals to them directly for the kids who come in for the forensic interviews and the medical exams, but we also do take call-in referrals as well. And so that's where people can kind of call and refer themselves or refer their own children for therapy. And we do have a lot of call-in referrals that come in and see our therapists, which is great. Once they kind of get into that, if they also need other things like some extra advocacy or case management or whatever, we can kind of get involved and provide that too, even for the call-in families that are here for therapy. And so that's just something that that we really enjoy. We have a lot of freedom to help in different situations, whether it's a case that came through initially for a forensic interview or not, which is nice. So with only having 2 counselors on staff, I think just like everywhere in the community right now, we do have a bit of a waiting list when it comes to the therapy services. So a lot of times we have to prioritize the cases that have come through for the forensic interviews and medicals. We kind of have to prioritize those with the therapy services. But as far as the call-in referrals, we also work really hard to get them in just as quickly as we can. So we keep a running waiting list. We don't turn anybody away unless it's very obvious that they just need a different type of service, and then we'll help them get referred to the most appropriate other place in the community.
And did I hear recently that one of your therapists is a male?
Yes.
It is.
Yep.
Male and a female.
Yep, male and a female.
I'm kind of changing the subject a little bit. Have you found that you'll see a child from a family and then see them again, like multiple victimizations?
Yes, unfortunately, that happens quite often. You'll have families come in, whether it's for drug endangerment, and then you'll get them back 6 months later for physical abuse. You'll get them to come in for sexual abuse, and then later down the road, the child's now sending pornographic images of their body to somebody. So unfortunately, in the beginning, with the therapy services, like the parents are so iffy. They're like, oh, it's a one-time thing. They're fine. So we work really hard to explain to the families, it might have been a one-time thing, but we need to make sure that that child has dealt with it. They know how to cope with it if something comes up. It may be something that happens a year from now. It might be a smell that they smell or a sound that they hear that can trigger them, and they need to know how to work through that. Mm-hmm. So educating the parents on the front end about how important the therapy services are is huge. And sometimes we do have a hard time with families buying into it. We have some families who want to deal with it themselves, depending on what their culture is. So that's a big one that we've unfortunately run into. So
absolutely. And even a lot of times I think there's still kind of sometimes a very pervasive belief of, if we just kind of don't talk about this and just push it away and just do the best we can to forget it ever happened, a lot of times there's still a very pervasive belief that it can be better if we do that. And unfortunately, just due to our experience and what we've seen, I mean, we know that that's not the case, and that if it's not dealt with, a lot of times it really can come up later and result in all kinds of things, all kinds of pain and all kinds of behaviors and higher risk and drug use and just all kinds of things to try to deal with what was never dealt with. So it can be really hard. And we really try to educate people that even if the child isn't showing symptoms right now and, this trauma's occurred, but they're still doing really well, A lot of times, if that's not dealt with, or if they don't get the appropriate counseling or just the appropriate healing, you see some really serious stuff happening a couple years down the road, or just whenever it might be. For each person, it's different, but it is kind of, hard just once in a while when you see, of course, it's always up to the parents. We can never force anybody to get counseling or anything like that. So sometimes it's really hard to see some of those cases walk out of the door, and kind of even more heartbreaking when you see them calling or walking back in the door a couple years later because of whatever's happened as a result.
And what's even trickier is whenever you have a child who's telling you in a forensic interview, in a medical, like, I self-harm all the time, I want to die, I want counseling, and the parents are like, oh, they don't need that. So at that point, it's really, really frustrating. And that's when, like, we have to go above and beyond and possibly make a report because they're not getting the child the help that they need for their mental health. So, and it's frustrating when we see that.
Yeah.
It makes me think, so most of us on this call know about ACEs, but that physical and sexual abuse are two of the things on that original ACEs list, and the long-term impacts for someone who's not heard this of all the way into adulthood, shortening life expectancy and health problems. And so just that, I feel like in some ways that puts an additional burden on those of us who work with that, because we know, like, what we do now it affects the quality of their life for the rest of their life.
Exactly.
So that's big. Mary McKinney asked, what were the names of the therapists that are with y'all now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So we have Bethany Gentry, and she's part-time right now, but sometimes we see her so much, it feels like she's full-time still. I think she would probably agree. And then we have Nathan Bates.
Thank you.
We had some wonderful therapists in the past, Mary McKinney.
Yes, we did. Yep.
And Christina.
Yep.
Selena, this is not exactly what you do with the CAC, but thinking about children being victimized, I read recently that children people who have been victimized increase exponentially their likelihood to be victimized again. And so thinking about some prevention types of things, can you talk a little bit, Selena, about what you do in the schools?
Yes, we do. It's called Child Help Speak Up, Be Safe. It is a prevention education program currently designed 1st through 6th grade. So we try to get into all the elementary schools and educate the children about the different types of abuse. We talk about physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and the verbiage is different for 1st graders versus a 6th grader. 6th graders, it also talks about like sexting, things of that nature, bullying, just making sure that they understand what these types of abuses are. And it gives examples. So like for a kid that's in the 5th grade, let's say sexual abuse or whatnot, someone touches or looks at or tries to talk about your private parts, that's sexual abuse. But if you're going to the doctor and they're looking at your private parts because you have been riding a bike and you've straddled the bar on the bike and they need to look at your private parts, that's not abuse. Talking about the differences in neglect, you're not getting the things that you need to stay safe and healthy. So you have food in your cabinet, but it's not the Doritos and the Pringles and the Oreos that you want. So you go to school and say you don't have any food at your house. That's inaccurate. You do have food at your house. It's just not exactly what you want to eat. So just making sure they understand, like, there's different scenarios, there's different things, and they don't have to make these decisions all on their own. If they think that they're being abused, they always have safe adults at school that they can come to. There's safe adults in the community that they can go to, whether it be somebody at their church, a friend's house, at school. It could be the bus driver on the way home from school. So just making sure that they realize that there are safe adults, and if they're not sure who they are, that there's multiple people at the schools that they can talk to, because the schools have always been such a huge supporter of the Speak Up, Be Safe program. But like I said, just educating them so they know. And a lot of these children, it's sad to say that they've been abused since they were so young that they don't realize that any of this is wrong. And I always use the example of Beth Browning. She used to be a cottage parent at South Mountain before she became the CAC nurse. And she picked up a 12-year-old girl from school one day, and they had the safe touch talk at school. And she looked at her as they were driving, and she said, "When did you figure out that your daddy shouldn't be having sex with you?" And I was like, "I just about ran off the road." She's like, "And I realized today that my sister and my daddy, they had that baby together, and that's not okay." So, I mean, she had lived in that for so long that she just thought that was the norm. So making sure that these children understand what is okay and what's not okay to happen with their body, and that they're the ones who are in charge of their body. If someone's doing something hurtful, harmful to it, they have the right to say no, and they have the right to tell somebody to help them to get it to stop. So I like that program. I just think it's so important for all these kids to be educated, and understanding the older kids who are now starting to date and getting in these relationships, that they're healthy relationships, that they're not being bullied into doing anything that they don't want to do. And if they are, it's okay to tell about it. We always talk about the sexting, the sending of pictures, that you send it and it's out there. There's no getting it back. It's like trying to get toothpaste back in a tube. It's impossible. Yeah. So making sure that they understand. And yes, people do make mistakes. They may send that picture, but don't let someone bully you into sending more pictures or other inappropriate pictures. We've had multiple kids come through. I sent a picture of my breast area with my bra on. Okay, so was your face in it? No, but they told me to send something else. And if I didn't, they were going to send that picture to my mom and my preacher, or to my mom and my uncle. So just that, making sure it's okay that you've made a mistake. Let's not let it happen again, but let's not continue with sending more inappropriate pictures. And that's modern technology. I cannot stand it. I cannot stand Snapchat. I don't know who created it. I wish they had it back. So just modern technology and the communication that kids have nowadays through mobile devices, it's such a pain in the behind. And I think that's really going to ruin a lot of kids, because they do so many things on these social media apps. And I've always told my kids, if you're not willing to say it or show it in front of me or your grandma, honey, you better not be showing it or saying it. So I think I've scared the bejeebies out of my kids. They didn't have a snowball's chance with Tim's job in mind. So
a teenager was telling me the other day that they send sexting images now, like you used to, ask somebody for their phone number or something.
Oh, yeah.
Way of interacting with people through social media. And it's the other thing that she was talking about is how much pressure it puts on the people who don't want to, because it's so common. Yes. Like that there seems to be some like, well, then what's wrong with you because you won't?
Right.
And so it's a really tough culture to try to navigate on social media right now.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it's not even just that. I mean, it affects the way they have conversations. They can't even talk to each other. Like they cannot carry on a 3-minute conversation without getting on their device or running out of something to say. So it's just, I hate the way it's affected kids altogether. So another day.
Yeah. It's been coming up a lot. I mean, I notice in interviews and the forensic interviews with teenagers, if the question comes up, have you ever received a picture or a text message or anything that wasn't okay? And with teenagers, I mean, it's like, well, duh, yeah, everybody has all the time. It's just the normal. It's a lot more common for them to have than not. I did want to just kind of a little rabbit hole. Speaking of the prevention program, the Speak Up, Be Safe, Selena had talked a lot about how it can be really important, because a lot of these kids, when they're raised in things a certain way, it can be something that they think is normal until they get the education of otherwise. And there was a forensic interview that I did with a little boy, and it just really impacted me so much how important these prevention programs are, because he had in this particular case, he had a situation of sexual abuse, and it was something that was presented like it was a joke or a game or not a big deal. And he said, but no, I learned in school, I know that no one should do that. And I know that that's sexual abuse. And I just thought, wow, I mean, that blew me away in that interview. And I was so blown away by the intelligence and the resiliency of that little boy too, but just the fact that those programs are so important that he was able to grab a hold of that and to know that that's not okay. And then he was able to advocate for himself, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's true. Somebody asked if y'all coordinate your classrooms programs with OASIS's. We had some Kelly Bass from Oasis on here many weeks ago talking about her healthy relationships presentation that she does, I think, with middle schoolers. And so the question was, do y'all coordinate any of that together at all?
We typically don't, because ours stops at the 6th grade and middle
Right.
school is typically 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So ours really doesn't overlap with that. And whoever's at the school knows if they're coming in to do that program or not. So years ago, I was asked to talk like at Green Valley and Valley Cruises about healthy relationships and sexting and teen dating violence. But I've not touched on that in a long time. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing that I had noticed with teenage, because I had a boy who's 22 now and a girl who's 17, and it's been really interesting watching how boys handle pressure or how they even feel pressure, and then how the girls, have felt the pressure to continue going out with boys that they don't like anymore, to do things that they don't want to do, to say yes to going out with somebody that they don't like in the first place. And the pressure to not make somebody mad at me, to go along with the crowd, to not be ostracized or bullied because they say no to a relationship. I really thought when my son went through, like, oh, look at this, no pressure, everything. And then to see the girls, how the girls handle things has been, it makes me sad because they seem to have much less power and autonomy than the males do. So just wish there was more of this going on at the high school level, because they seem to forget when they leave the elementary schools that they get to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk then about how you stay well. I don't think any of us, we don't really measure the severity of trauma necessarily, or we shouldn't, but there's a lot of things that I see in here, and then I think to myself, yeah, but, people at Children's Advocacy Center, y'all are like I don't know how you do what you do. So talk to me about how you separate work from home and how you continue because Selena, talking like Stephanie's really calm, but Selena, I would think you work at Daniel Boone Inn or something. You're always upbeat. You're always smiling and cheerful. Selena is always ready to go. And so I've always wondered how y'all can do
funny.
carry what you carry and still keep really very either calm or very upbeat and positive demeanors that y'all have.
Well, I will say when I graduated from App State and I was doing my internship, with DJJ down in Morganton, and a very wise person told me that whenever you do your job to the fullest every day. You know that you've done your job. And when you walk out at 5 o'clock, you know that there's nothing left that you're going to be able to do at that point. So you have to be able to separate work and personal life. And it's very hard for me to do that, but I try very hard to do that. I do come to work. I try to do as much as I can on all the cases that we have. Even when I was a social worker, I gave that all my focus during the day to know that I've done everything that I can do. And some things are out of my control, whether it be a judge's decision or a bad choice that a parent's made. But I come to work, and I think we both come to work and do everything that we can for these cases every day. So just knowing that when we leave here, that's the time that we need to focus on us, because we have families that depend on us as well. There could be many days that I could stay here and DSS would be called on me because I forgot my kids at a ball game or something. So it's bad. I mean, there are days that it's like, oh my God, I do have kids. I need to go home. But just realizing that you need to be able to separate that. I do have, and I'm going to brag, 3 wonderful children, 21, 18, and 16. And I think that's a lot of my self-care is being able to spend time with them and see them play sports and graduate from college. One graduates from high school Friday. So just being involved with them and having that as an outlet is a huge thing. Having good friends to be with. I think one of the biggest things for me is being able to come to work with somebody who experiences the same thing that I do. And we can bounce stuff off each other. Like I can be sitting at my desk and Stephanie's like, what's wrong with you? Or are you okay? Or was that a chipmunk over there? Or what?
Sorry.
So we know how to joke with each other.
Yeah.
If there's a case that's really upsetting, I mean, she's wonderful to check on me. We have 2 awesome therapists who will come in and check on us. And all the therapists that we've worked with have always been wonderful to come and check on us. Like, we heard there was a really bad case. How are you doing? So having that is huge.
Yeah.
So a little self-care. I like to exercise, but I don't exercise enough. Of course, I get to see Denise at a softball game and a soccer game in Taylorsville. So seeing people that I've not seen in forever because of COVID. Went to a ball game last night at the high school, stayed till 10:15, way past my bedtime, but it was good to see people. You've not seen anybody. And I think that hurt the most, like this past year, not having those personal connections with people outside of work. You come to work, you go home. You're not doing all the other extracurricular activities. So I think keeping those relationships and things are important. And of course, there's a little late time for graduation and birthday parties. You get to go to the lake and hang out for a little bit and spend time with families. So I think any of that is good for self-care. So
absolutely.
Thanks, Selena. Stephanie, what about you?
Yeah. So well, first of all, so the thing you said about me being calm, I appreciate that. That's definitely an outside thing. I think if you saw the inside of my brain, it would be so I'm not sure how I do that on the outside, but I'm glad, apparently. But yeah, it's different on the inside. But I think, I mean, what Selena was saying, probably the hugest thing in this job, it really is so helpful to have, you know, Selena's desk and mine is like 5 feet away, you know, so we have such a small office. And so on any given day, there's only like 4 of us here. And then on the days when our nurse is here, there's like 5 of us. And so we're able to have this really tight knit group where, you know, we can all kind of check on each other and talk about things and make sure that one another's okay. And just, we have that kind of, that closeness and that connection of, you know, that we all are seeing the same things and kind of going through the same things. And so that's really, really helpful, is just that feeling of not being alone in it, that we've always got this team. And a lot of times, I mean, I look at like the social workers and the law enforcement officers that we work with, and I think they're the ones that I'm looking at going, oh my God, how do you do what you do every day? You know, and so there's other things that this job can be hard, and what we see can be hard, but then there's also other jobs that I'm like, oh, thank God I'm not doing that, because I don't know how in the world I would. So I think it just kind of, it takes everybody just having that connection and being able to be there for one another. I am a big believer also in just like physical exercise for mental health. That helps me a lot. I don't do it as often as I should, but I know that when I do go out running or something, it really helps. That and getting out in nature. Faith helps me a lot, because there's so many things that I feel like I want to fix, but I know that I can't fix. It's beyond me to fix that. And so it really helps to, you know, to believe that there is someone and something who can, you know, and somebody's hands that are bigger that I can put that in. I don't have kids of my own, but I get just a lot of joy from my niece and nephews and my 2 dogs. So, yeah, just, I think just people and getting outside and exercising, but probably the most important thing I think is the people and the community that we have, and just being there for one another.
Oh yeah, because I mean, if we hear that something's happening, I mean, we don't mind to pick up the phone and call a social worker or detective and be like, hey, what's up? How are you? Or just to check on anybody. And I mean, and I think all of the community partners that are in Watauga County, I think we have a connection with somebody in every one of them. So just having that connection and the ability to call and say, hey, look, how are you? Or is this something that you can help me with, or anything like that? And I think we both have a really I think we both have really good husbands that are supportive too. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
You come home and I'm grouchy and Tim's looking at me and is like, he knows not to say anything for a few minutes. And so I think that's a big thing. So
Yeah.
We talk a lot about relationships and community and how those are so helpful for staying well. It occurs to me when you're talking that we all can say the list of things we do to try to take care of ourselves and stay well, but there's something before that, which is like the moment of knowing I need to leave, I need to put this down, I need to turn this over, I need to do something for myself. And I think sometimes, I know for me, that is the harder point to identify. Like I know when I need to exercise, but the knowing of, I think that's something I've had to learn as an adult is what my own breaking point is and stopping before I get to it. Like used to be like right in my 20s and 30s, I'd be like, I'm past my breaking point and I would snap and, lose my temper or whatever. And it took a lot of years, especially because I didn't grow up in a regulated house. So nobody taught me that skill. But it took a lot of years to learn to recognize before I got to the breaking point when the irritability happens or when I'm starting to feel tired and then the explosion comes a day or two later. So I think, hearing you say, I know I need to go home or I know I need to turn this over, I think is really helpful in thinking about it's not just the activity that you're talking about, but reaching the point where you know that you need to do something for yourself. It's time. So that's helpful.
I think we're pretty good at, like, if we know we've had 3 or 4 interviews during the day and it's 3:30 and we're working on paperwork and we kind of look at each other like 4:30, it's like, I think we just need to go.
Yeah.
We just need to give it up for the day.
Yeah.
So it's good to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
So
or let's go fast while we can before another call comes in. But
yes.
I'm kidding, because
run out the door.
if we get the call, we'll come back. I promise. But
And I love when we get a phone call from somebody and we know who it is because we have caller ID and they're like, oh, we need to schedule an interview. Like, we have stopped those services temporarily. so we can't help you today. But we're just kidding. We'll help anybody at any time. So.
Well, and speaking of that, I know everybody on this call knows what great people y'all are, but I happened to be on a call with y'all when we were talking about something as unrelated as what you do could possibly be. And I was talking about somebody that was in trouble with Stephanie, and Selena was in the background and just heard.
Oh, yeah.
Like stepped into the call and was like, there's this and that, and there's this and that.
Yeah.
Let me go find out what I can do.
Sorry.
No, it was great because I was like, many other people would have been like, that has nothing to do with me, and kept on walking. And it ended up being so very helpful. So just really appreciate the fact that y'all not only are very helpful and supportive of your own clients, but are, like you said, if you know somebody's having a hard time, y'all reach out to try to help. So we appreciate that.
And that situation has turned out, I think, fairly well, because I think so. Just had contact with them yesterday. So they're still asking questions and getting guidance. So I think that worked out well.
Yeah. That's one thing that I love about just, just having the freedom and everything from, like, our supervisors support us being able to do that. And so I love having that freedom here, that it doesn't have to be particularly like our client, that we get that freedom to help in the community. So that's really great.
It's not the birth to 18 that we typically deal with, but I mean, we have the knowledge of those resources and we're able to share it and make sure that our community's okay.
Yeah.
So as people are thinking, if you have a comment or a question or for Selena or Stephanie, you're welcome to put them in the chat and we'll ask them on whatever you share with us. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to ask you. Anything that I haven't thought to ask you that you want to share with us?
Sorry. So when the comments come up, we get a little box, and y'all are cracking us up a little bit. So we're getting
typically every April we have our open house for Child Abuse Prevention Month, and we've not done it in the past 2 years. And Teresa has talked about our snacks. I love having our open house because I love all the food and the people that it's like we have a party.
It's a party, yeah.
I love seeing everybody here. It's like they come over and they get to see our house, and we get to show off, and we love it. So I've missed that.
Yeah. Speaking of where y'all are, I'm assuming that, so if you don't know, they're way out in Fosco. And I'm
Egypt.
assuming
Yep.
there's a reason for that. Every time I drive by there, I'm like, this is so far. But I'm assuming that's an added benefit for some reason. So the location of your place is intentional to be that far out from Boone. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that is a very good
Yeah.
question.
So we have an MOU with Watauga and Avery counties. And so we started out in Blowing Rock Pass, right there beside Wahoo's. That's where we were at to start off with. And as the cases continued to increase for Avery County, our big boss wanted to put us somewhere centrally located. We're conveniently located to nothing, but we are centrally located between the two counties.
Yeah.
So we're out here in Egypt. But we have also been providing services for Ashe County. And I'm excited to say that we're fixing to open a satellite office in Ashe County.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
We're fixing to open one up
Teresa.
right off of 163 across from Blue Ridge Electric there.
Yeah.
So Stephanie and I will be kind of handling all that stuff until they can find like a full-time director and advocate over there.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's such a long haul for everybody from Ashe County to come over here. Like I said, I was a social worker before, so I know how valuable their time is. So coming over here for an interview and then having to travel back and just being more convenient for the agencies and the families and getting resources over there. Hopefully they're going to get a full-time clinician in that office as well. So I'm excited for Ashe County to have that there. So
That is exciting. Congratulations.
yeah, so.
One thing that somebody had mentioned back when we were talking about our own wellness was the relational care, community care to make sure we take care of ourselves with
Mhm.
and sometimes needing prompting from someone else.
Yes.
You talked about that with your husband or with your office mates, your colleagues saying, it really is time to go.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I've really liked that I've learned this year. The term self-care never felt right to me, like one more responsibility or burden that I had, something else that I wasn't doing to my standard of perfection. And so, realizing that it's really more of a community thing, or at least that's what resonates with me, to help each other take better care of ourselves.
Mhm.
So, and lots of comments about how excited we are about the new office. Yay.
Yay. We're excited. I'm excited that we get to be part of it to help start it.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's two. Y'all get to do two jobs now.
Not forever, but we are really excited.
All right, so Stephanie, anything else that you want to share with us before we wrap things up that I didn't think to ask you or that has occurred to you as we've been talking?
Nothing's super coming into my mind. What about you, Selena?
I don't have anything really that I've thought about. I just want to say thank you to everybody for the support that we have gotten from the community. We wouldn't be here without everybody that's in the community. So we really appreciate that. Like I said, I love having the relationships with pretty much somebody in all of the agencies in the county so we can call and ask for help or guidance. I don't think I've ever had an issue with anybody not wanting to help us, help a family. So that's huge. So we just want to say thank you for all the support that we get from everybody.
Yeah.
Well, and I really appreciate being able to call y'all. Back when I first started 28 years ago, there was somebody at DSS, you could call her and be like, this and this and this, and she'd, tell you what to do or what she thought. And I really like being able to call y'all and say, this is what I have. What do you think I should do? And in fact, which makes me think of, I guess it was 2 years ago. And we had a case that was all in one: sexual abuse, physical abuse by a parent, possible law enforcement charges, and it all kind of blew up at once. And I had, I think, Stephanie on the phone. I was texting with an officer and had Stephanie on one phone and somebody else on another phone from DSS, and just the coordination. So yeah, Stephanie, even though you don't feel inwardly calm, you definitely are outwardly calm. And so just knowing that there's somebody there, I think we all know now we're not supposed to question kids about possible sexual abuse. We need to call y'all. So just knowing that you're there to kind of help us staff those things. If we need to, we can call you. And no matter how busy you are, somebody texts me right back or emails me right back. So we appreciate that too.
Yep.
Awesome.
So I'm going to copy any thank yous or comments in the chat and email them to you so that you can look over those when you get some time.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
we appreciate y'all taking time out of your day to be with us and tell us more about what you do. And for everybody that's on the call, I'm going to try to send out, it sounds like the email didn't go out. Well, it went out. The email wasn't received by people today. I'm not sure what that's about. I'm thinking possibly because there was over 500 people on there, but usually I get an email saying it didn't go. So I'll send everybody the recording on the email list, try to figure out what happened to that. And we'll plan on seeing you next Wednesday. And hope everybody has a good rest of the day. Selena and Stephanie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And good luck with starting your new office. That's super
Yay.
exciting. We hope that goes well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.